إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلوات الله وسلامه عليه. أما بعد، يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. أما بعد، فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وأحسن هدي محمد صلوات الله وسلامه عليه وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. ثم أما بعد. Oh my sisters, inshallah ta'ala, today's talk will be a reminder, bi'ithnillahi ta'ala. And I want everyone to contemplate and to reflect. Throughout the talk, I want you to reflect and I want you to look at yourself in light of what is being presented. Because no doubt, seeking knowledge and having knowledge and implementing knowledge, it is something that is tremendous. And it is something that we all need to strive toward. And inshallah ta'ala, we would like to make this luncheon, unlike other luncheons and talks and the like, where we come, we listen, and we leave without any change. But rather we want to take this opportunity and every opportunity after this, when we are in classes, when we are in seminars and the like, that when we hear, we benefit and we increase, and we leave better than when we came. Because there is no one from amongst us who is perfect. There is no one from amongst us except that we all need help and we have much room for improvement. So with that being the case, I want you to contemplate to a hadith that has been collected in Saheeh Muslim عن زيد بن أرقم رضي الله تعالى عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول, that the Prophet, the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم, he used to say, and I want you to contemplate over the meaning of this dua. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he will supplicate to Allah Ta'ala, and he will say, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min ilmin la yanfa' wa min qalbin la yakhsha' wa min nafsin la tashba' wa min da'watin la yustajabu laha. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he used to supplicate to Allah Ta'ala, saying, O Allah, verily I seek refuge in you from knowledge which is non-beneficial. O Allah, I seek refuge in you from knowledge that is of no benefit, and from a heart which does not fear, and from a soul which is not satisfied, and from a supplication which is not answered. Bila shak, at-tafaqquh fi ad-din, have an understanding of the deen, it is only built upon ilmun nafi'. It is only built upon beneficial knowledge. So this is our section of the luncheon where we want to listen to some things of beneficial knowledge, inshallah ta'ala, from the book of Allah and from the sunnah of His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So in light of that beneficial knowledge, do we know that when we hear the ayat of Allah ta'ala, and when we hear the ahadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and when we hear the narrations from the Salaf al-Salih radiyallahu ta'ala anhum ajma'een, that knowledge that we're learning or being reminded of, it necessitates action. It necessitates action, that we act upon it. Not that we're just reading the ayat to pass the time, or we're just reading the ahadith to pass the time, or reading from the narrations of the Salaf to pass the time, but so that we may either learn or be reminded, so that we may implement. We may implement and live by what we are learning or being reminded of. Because if not, then this knowledge will be a hujjah against us. It will be a proof against us. The Prophet ﷺ, as it comes in a hadith that's muttafaqun alayh, a hadith that's been collected by Al-Bukhari and Muslim and agreed upon its authenticity by both Imams Al-Bukhari and Muslim rahimahumullah ta'ala. And Usama bin Zayd, on the authority of Usama bin Zayd radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, قال وإني سمعته يقول, يعني النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, he said that verily I heard him saying, meaning the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, مررت ليلة الإسراء بأقوام تقرض شفاههم بمقاريض من النار. That the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that I passed by people on the night of the Isra. I passed by people who were having their lips cut off. تقرض شفاههم, their lips were being severed, were being cut off. بمقاريض من النار, by scissors from the hellfire. Their lips were being cut off with scissors from the fire. قلت, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, so I said, Man ha'ula ya Jibreel? He says, I said to Jibreel, who are these people? Who are those ones who are getting their lips cut off with scissors from the fire? فقال جبريل عليه الصلاة والسلام خطباء أمتك الذين يقولون ما لا يفعلون. He said that they are the preachers, the ones who gave sermons, khutbas or khutub from your ummah, from your nation, those who did not do what they used to say, those who didn't implement what they used to call the people to. So we see that this knowledge, it requires from us action, because the knowledge without the action will be very destructive, it will harm us. Whereas if we couple the knowledge with action, then it will benefit us, and it will be a proof for us. In another narration, وفي رواية رواه ابن أبي دنيا وابن حبان والبيحقي من حديث الأنس. In another narration that has been collected by Ibn Abi Dunya, Ibn Habban and Bayhaqi from the hadith of Anas radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, the description was described as being that they read the book of Allah, but they don't act in accordance to it. That they read the book of Allah, but they don't act in accordance to it. So it is not enough that we hear and we learn, but we have to learn and then we have to implement. We have to act in accordance to. We have to shape our lives so that it agrees to the book of Allah and the sunnah of His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam as understood by the Salaf. Because if not, then we will be endangering ourselves. We will be harming ourselves by not living by what we know. And this is the theme of today's talk, to live by what we know. Because when we speak about the makarimul akhlaq, the good behavior and good conduct and good character, many of this speech will be a reminder of things of which we already have knowledge of. But what is important is that we implement these things that we know. So this is what I want everyone to keep on their minds, to contemplate of. Bithnillahi ta'ala. So we want to look at the issue of shyness and piety. And we want to bring an example from the book of Allah, where Allah ta'ala addresses the women, a specific women to be specific, which the generality and the general masses of the women, they also benefit from this. As the specific women who are addressed. They are the examples for the women. They are the role models for the women. But ala kulli hal, we want to look at the issue of piety and shyness, being shy. Because in this shyness you will find all good. As there comes a hadith that has been collected by Imam al-Bukhari and Imam Muslim, rahimahumullahu ta'ala, where the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he said, Al-haya'u la ya'ti illa bi khayrin. He says that shyness, it doesn't come except with good. But for riwayah lil-Muslim, and in a narration that's collected by Muslim, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he said, Al-haya' khayrun kulluhu. That shyness, all of it is good. That shyness, all of it is good. And know, my dear sisters, that shyness, it is a branch of Iman. It is a characteristic of Iman, and a sign and a trait that points to Iman, faith. As it also comes in a hadith that's been collected by al-Bukhari and Muslim, from the hadith of Abi Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال الإيمان بدع وسبعون أو بدع وستون شعبة. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said that Iman, it is 70 some odd or 60 some odd branches. أفضلها قول لا إله إلا الله. The greatest level of it is the statement La ilaha illallah, that nothing has the right to be worshipped in truth except Allah. وَأَدْنَاهَا إِمَاطَةُ الْأَذَى عَنِ الطَّرِيقِ. And the lowest branch is to remove something harmful from the street. To remove something harmful from the street. And we understand from this al-fahm wal-mukhalafa, which means that we understand the opposite. That from Iman is to remove something harmful from the street. Likewise, from Iman is not to place anything harmful in the street. It's not to place anything harmful in the street. And this is another example and illustration how Islam calls to everything that is good. Calls to everything that is good. So the Muslims, we are in no need of any brochures or things to encourage us to recycle and not to pollute and the like, because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he already taught us these affairs. Ala kulli hal, it goes on and it says that wal haya shu'batun min al iman, and that shyness, it is a branch from Iman. Shyness is a branch from Iman. Now, if you want to know what is shyness, Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, and this is where you need your pen and your paper. Now, so inshallah ta'ala, you brought your pen and your paper. If you don't have paper, then you inshallah, because it's a luncheon, you should have some napkins. So write it on the napkin, bi'idhnillah. Because Imam al-Nawawi, he explains what shyness is. He says that haqiqatul haya khuluqun. He said that the reality of haya, that it is a characteristic, it is a trait, khuluqun yab'athu ala tark al-qabih, that it incites one to leave off doing ugly and despicable actions, that it makes one leave off ugly and despicable actions. So shyness is to one leave off ugly and despicable actions. وَيَمْنَعُ مِنَ التَّقْصِيرِ فِي حَقٍّ ذِي الْحَقِّ. And it also prevents an individual from coming up short and fulfilling the rights of the one who has rights. So twofold shyness is: one, it prevents an individual from doing despicable acts. Two, it prevents the individual from coming up short in the fulfilling of rights. In the fulfilling of rights. Now, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, we want to look at an example, and to give an example to the woman from the book of Allah ta'ala, whereby they will learn how to be shy. And if they implement this, then they would be implementing and learning and have an example of how to implement and be shy. How to be shy. Now, and this is from Allah Ta'ala's statement in Surah Al-Ahzab, where Allah Ta'ala, He says, addressing our mothers, Ya Nisa al-Nabi, lastunna ka ahadan min al-Nisa. Allah Ta'ala, He says, O wives of the Prophet, you are not like other women. You are not like other women. Ibn Abbas radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he explains that this means, he says, Yuridu laysa قدركن عندي مثل قدر غيركن من النساء الصالحات أنتن أكرم علي. He says what it means is that you are, or your level, your standard, your status is not with me, is different from the status of others from the righteous women. Verily you are more noble to me, meaning Allah Ta'ala. So Allah Ta'ala, He's explaining to them that they are the most noble of the Muslim women, the wives of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, wa radiyallahu ta'ala anhun. So we understand from this that although the address is to our mothers specifically, in general it is to all the Muslim women, because our mothers, they are the role models and the examples for the Muslim women. Now, that our mothers, they are the role model and the example for the Muslim women. Right? Now, let me remind you that to be noble with Allah is based upon a very important characteristic and trait. As Allah Ta'ala, He says, Ya ayyuhan nas, inna khalaqnakum min dhakarin wa untha. Allah Ta'ala, He says, O mankind, we made you from a man and a woman. من ذكر وأنثى, from a man and a woman. وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلٍ, and we made you into different nations and tribes. لِتَعَارَفُوا, so that you may learn from one another. You may learn from one another. نعم. إِنَّ أَكْرَمَكُمْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَتْقَاكُمْ, and that verily the most noble with Allah is the one who fears Allah the most, the one who has the most taqwa. That the most noble of human beings with Allah is the one who has the most taqwa. So, the only way that one could be more noble and better than someone else will be if they fear Allah more. It's not based on the color of their skin. It's not based on the texture of their hair. It's not based on the origin or the language in which they speak or the land in which they come from, but rather is based on whether or not one fears Allah. The more one fears Allah, then the better one is. So if one wants to strive to be the best, then we have to strive in what? In increasing in taqwa, increasing in piety and fearing Allah Ta'ala. This is how one level is raised in reality. And this is important to understand, because Allah Ta'ala, He goes on to say in this ayah from Surah Al-Ahzab, where He says, Ya Nisa al-Nabi, lastunna ka ahadan min al-Nisa. O wives of the Prophet, you are not like any other women. In ittaqaytunna fala takhda'na bil qawli. If you fear Allah Ta'ala, if you have piety and have true taqwa of Allah Ta'ala, and now Allah Ta'ala starts to give to them examples, and He starts to give to them things in which they are to do, directives in which they are to implement, so that they can fulfill this taqwa. Because taqwa is not something that just resides in the heart, ya ibad. It's not something that just resides in the heart, but rather the taqwa, it is that which is in the heart. It is heard on the tongue and is expressed in the limbs. Naam. Ala kulli hal, Allah Ta'ala, He says, فَلَا تَخْضَعْنَا بِالْقَوْلِ. The first characteristic, He says, then be not soft in your speech. Be not soft in your speech. وَقَالَ Siddiq, as Imam Ibn Kathir, rahimahullah Ta'ala, he mentions in his tafsir, وَقَالَ Siddiq وَغَيْرُهُ, and other than him, he said, يعني بذلك ترقيق الكلام. He said this means to be easy and soft and sweet in the speech. إذا خاطبنا الرجال, when you speak to men, meaning that when you speak to men, do not be soft and sweet and flirtatious in your speech. Don't do this. Now, Imam Sa'di, rahimahullah ta'ala, he goes to explain what this means. Don't be soft in your speech. He says, fi mukhatabat al-rijal, meaning when you're speaking to men. Aw bihayth, or even if you're not speaking to them directly, aw bihayth yasma'una fatalinna fi dhalika. He said, or that maybe you're speaking to other women, but you know you could be heard by men. So don't be soft when speaking like this, when you know that men can hear you. Now, the Shaykh, he says, وَتَتَكَلَمْنَا بِكَلَامْ رَقِيقٍ يَدْعُو وَيَطْمَعُ الَّذِي فِي قَلْبِهِ مَرَضٌ. He says, meaning that you speak in such a way that is light and is soft, so that it rattles and it brings up the desires. It brings up the desires of the one who has a disease in his heart. It arouses the one who has a disease inside of his heart. So don't do that. Now, Imam Sa'di, he explains about the one who has a disease in his heart. Because this disease in the heart is not something that is restricted just to the men, but also to the women as well. So the Imam, he gives some symptoms by way of which one can diagnose whether or not his heart is sick or whether or not it is healthy. The Shaykh, he says that the one who has a disease in his heart, he says it means al-marad al-shahwa to zina. It means the sickness to fornicate. He has this sick desire in his heart to commit acts of fornication. The Shaykh, he says, فَإِنَّهُ مُسْتَعِدٌ, that this one, he's ready to make fornication. And this is why the women, they are called to not speak softly, to not speak in a flirtatious manner, or to speak in a way in which will be pleasant to the one in which they're addressing. And we know that the woman, she has two voices. She has her regular voice, and then she has the voice in which she speaks to her husband. Now, and this type of voice in which you speak to your husband in a soft, gentle, easy, nice way, where the smile is present, some aspects of flirtation and the like, this is only for the husband. Only for the husband. Whereas others from mankind do not speak to him in this way. Because you have from mankind those who have a sickness, those who have a disease in their hearts, those who may harm the women in trying to chase after and fulfill this disease. So the Imam, he says that فَإِنَّهُ مُسْتَعِدٌ, that the one who has this disease in his heart, then he's ready. He's always ready. نعم. وَيَنْظُرُ أَدْنَى muharrikun yuharriku. He says, and the slightest of provocation provokes him. The slightest of provocation provokes him. And maybe it can be a real provocation, or it could be a perceived provocation. It could be a real and genuine invitation, or it can be a perceived invitation. He just thinks she's flirting. Maybe she's not flirting. He just assumes she's flirting, thinks she's flirting. This is how sick he is. This is how corrupt he is. That the slightest thing will make him want to rush and try to commit the zina. The Shaykh, he says, لِأَنَّ قَلْبَهُ غَيْرُ صَحِيحٍ. He said because his heart is not sound. His heart is not healthy. So therefore the slightest thing moves this individual and causes him to want to make the zina, to want to make the fornication. So as a way to protect yourselves, O my sisters, from the likes of these individuals, is that you do not be soft in your speech when speaking to men. The Shaykh, he says, فَإِنَّ قَلْبُ صَحِيحٍ لَيْسَ فِيهِ شَهْوَةٍ لِمَا حَرَّمَ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى. He said, because the heart that is sound, is healthy, it does not have this desire for that which Allah has made haram. فَإِنَّ ذَلِكَ لَا تَكَادُ تَمِيلُهُ وَلَا تَحَرِّقُ الْأَسْبَابِ. He said then that, he's not moved and he's not caused and provoked to make the haram things by any of the likes of these things. And this is due to what? لِصِحَّةِ قَلْبِهِ. This is because of the soundness and the healthiness of his heart, وَسَلَامَتُهُ مِنَ الْمَرَضِ, and the safety of his heart from any type of sickness and disease. That the one whose heart is not sick, then even if she's flirting, he won't be moved. Even if she's acting in an inappropriate manner and speaking in an inappropriate manner, he will not be moved. But he would run and he would flee away from her. But he won't be moved to try to make the zina. Whereas the one who has in his heart a sickness, and how many are they in this time in which we live in? The slightest hint, whether real or perceived, will cause him to want to make the zina and to take the road and the step to make the zina. Naam. So the Shaykh, he says, بِخَلَافِ الْمَرِيضِ الْقَلْبِ, different in contrast to the one who has a disease in his heart. الَّذِي لَا يَتَحَمَّلُ مَا يَتَحَمَّلُ الصَّحِيحِ, the one who he doesn't have what the one who's healthy has. The sick, he doesn't have what the one who is healthy has. وَلَا يَصْبِرُ عَلَى مَا يَصْبِرُ عَلَيْهِ, nor is he patient upon the one who is healthy is patient upon. The one who's sick, he can't be patient like the one who is healthy. He doesn't have it in him. فَأَدْنَى سَبَبْ يُوجَدْ, so you'll find that the smallest cause that is present, the smallest provocation, يَدْعُوهُ إِلَى الْحَرَامِ, the smallest provocation invites him to make the haram. And this one who's sick, يُجِيبُ دَعْوَةً, he answers it. وَلَا يَتَعَاصِي عَلَيْهِ, and he doesn't refuse it. So I want you to pay attention now real good. The Shaykh, he says, فَهَذَا دَلِيلٌ عَلَىٰ أَنَّ الْوَسَائِلِ لَهَا أَحْكَامُ الْمَقَاصِدِ. He said this is a proof that the means carry the same ruling as their end. Again, that the means carry the same ruling as their end. So we know the end result of this flirtation, inappropriate speech, being soft in speech and the like is what? Is that it leads to zina. It leads to fornication. The end is fornication. And we know that fornication is haram. Fornication, it is haram. So likewise, everything which is a means to acts of fornication, everything which leads to fornication is also haram. This is what the Shaykh means. That the means carry the same ruling as the end, or as their end. So zina is haram, and anything which leads to zina is subsequently also haram, prohibited. Now, the Shaykh, he says, فَإِنَّ الْخُضُوعَ بِالْقَوْلِ وَاللِّينَ فِيهِ فِي الْأَصْلِ مُبَاحٍ. He said because being soft and easy in speech and being submissive in speech is by its origin mubah. By its origin it's mubah, it's allowed. The Shaykh, he says, وَلَكِنْ لَمَّا كَانَ وَسِيلًا إِلَى الْحَرَامِ. He said, but when that thing that is by its origin permissible, when it becomes a means to commit the haram and a means towards the haram, then it by itself becomes what? Haram. مُنِعَ مِنْهُ. Then therefore it is prohibited. وَلِهَذَا يَنْبَغِي لِلْمَرْأَةِ فِي خِطَابَةِ الرِّجَالِ أَنْ لَا تَلِينَ لَهُمْ الْقَوْلِ. He says, so therefore it is incumbent upon the woman when she speaks to men that she is not soft in her speech. That she is not soft in her speech. That she sweetens not her speech. وَلَمَّا نَهَاهُنَّ عَنِ الْخُضُوعِ فِي الْقَوْلِ. And when Allah Ta'ala had prohibited them from being easy and soft in their speech, فَرُبَّمَا تَوَهَّمُوا أَنَّهُنَّ مَأْمُورَاتٍ بِإِغْلَاظِ الْقَوْلِ or بِإِغْلَاظِ الْقَوْلِ. He said it may be misunderstood that they are being ordered to be harsh in their speech. Okay? So since they have been prohibited from being soft in their speech, it may be misunderstood then they are being commanded to be harsh and hard in their speech. فَدَفَعَ هَذَا بِقَوْلِهِ. And this is removed by Allah Ta'ala's statement, وَقُلْنَا قَوْلًا مَعْرُوفًا. But rather say, or rather speak in a most honorable manner. Because it's not intended to not be easy and soft in your speech and sweet and flirtatious in your speech. Then you have to be harsh and rude and the like. So the Shaykh, he says, Yani Allah Ta'ala, He commands them, but speak in an honorable manner. He says, meaning غَيْرُ غَلِيظ, yani not rude, وَلَا جَافٍ, كما أنه ليس بلين وخاضع. He said, meaning don't speak to them in a rude and a rough manner, just like you don't speak in a soft, easy, sweet, and very like a very subservient type of manner. Meaning that you speak in a regular tone. You speak regular. Okay? So, in explaining this, the great scholar Ibn Zayd, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, أي قولا معروفا, meaning قولا حسنا جميلا معروفا في الخير. He said, meaning a statement that is honorable, a statement that is good, a statement that is well known for its good quality. وقال إمام ابن كثير رحمه الله تعالى ومعنى هذا, he said the meaning of this, أنها تخاطب الأجانب بكلام ليس فيه ترخيم. He says, meaning that she speaks to her non-relative men, meaning her non-maharim, those men who are not her close relatives, who she cannot marry, meaning she doesn't speak to them in a soft, easy, flirtatious manner. He say, أي لا تخاطب المرأة الأجانب كما تخاطب زوجها, meaning that a woman, she does not speak, and this is the principle now, a woman does not speak to foreign men the same way she's supposed to speak to her husband. Now I'm going to say that again. That a woman, she does not speak to foreign men, meaning men who are not her relatives, who she can marry. She doesn't speak to them in the same manner that she's supposed to speak to her husband. Now I'm saying supposed to speak to her husband, because bil asaf, unfortunately, not all of our sisters speak to their husband in a proper manner. You should speak to your husband in a nice, sweet, soft, gentle manner. Okay? That's for your husband. It's not for other than him. So you don't speak to other men like you should be speaking to your husband. And unfortunately, you'll find some women, some sisters, they are sick. They have sicknesses in their heart, where you'll find that they'll speak to their husband in the most rude manner, the most harsh manner. But yet when they go out shopping, they're speaking to everyone in every store, every man in every store, in the most sweet, flirtatious type of speech you will ever hear. But when it comes to her husband, she's nasty and she's rude. This is not correct. This is the opposite of what should be done. So this is what we want to warn you from. It is not permissible to be flirting in this with these strange men. This is not permissible. And this is not from shyness to do that. So you find from the way of being shy is that what? She does not speak to men in this type of way. Now the Shaykh, he says, ta'amman, contemplate now. He says, كيف قال فلا تخضعن بالقول ولم يقل فلا تلن بالقول. He said, now contemplate now. How is it said, do not have what's called khudu' in your speech? And we're going to explain now the difference between khudu' in the speech and between being lean and that. And this is where the English language really is a disservice. So this is another encouragement to encourage everyone to learn Arabic, because this is the only way you can truly, it is a means of truly understanding the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because when we translate it now, the translation says, do not be soft in the speech. Now being soft in the speech is like the meaning of talinna bil qawl, being soft in the speech. But what is intended is more than just softness in the speech, as the Shaykh is going to explain. He says, ذَلِكَ لِأَنَّ الْمَنْهِ عَنْهُ الْقَوْلُ اللِّينَ. He said, because what is being prohibited is what? Is softness in speech, الَّذِي فِيهِ خُضُوعٌ. He said it's not just any softness, but the softness in the speech that has and it contains therein some type of submissiveness for the woman, للرجل, that she's submissive and subservient in her speech to the man. Meaning that she's soft in a way, in a flirtatious way, that she's allowing the man or establishing his dominance over her. And this is why the one who has a sickness of zina in his heart, he's moved to try to make zina, because in his mind he understands from this that she is allowing me to have my way with her. Do you understand? So it's not just softness, but it's the softness that has this aspect to it. So as to close the door on this, the door on all softness is closed. Okay? So as to close the door on this type of softness, the door on all softness in speech is closed. The Shaykh, he says, because it is quite possible, right, that an individual can speak with easy speech. He can be soft and mild in his speech. وَلَيْسَ فِيهِ خُضُوعٌ, but he doesn't have any type of subservientness. Right? He says, وَبَلْ رُبَّمَا صَارَ فِيهِ تَرَفُّعٌ وَقَهْرٌ لِلْخَصْمِ. He said, but rather, even to the opposite and contrary, he may be easy in his speech, but at the same time, he may be establishing his dominance, meaning that he's easy in his speech, but rather condescending. Right? He's easy, but condescending. Like those people who say that when they debate, they refute and they overcome their component or their opponent with a smile. With a smile. So although they're easy and gentle in their speech, they're still what? Establishing their dominance in that at the same time. So the Shaykh says, so it must be understood that you do have from soft speech this type. That is soft in the way, in its delivery, but its reality is quite the opposite. Right? فَعَلَى كُلِّ حَالٍ, the Shaykh explains, so as to close the door on all of these types, then the woman, she has been ordered not to be soft in her speech, period. Not to be soft in her speech, period. So that she does not stir up the desires of the one who has a disease in his heart. The Shaykh, he says, وَمَعَ أَمْرِهِ بِحِفْظِ الْفَرْجِ وَثَنَاء عَلَى الْحَافِظِينَ الْفُرُوجَهُمْ وَحَافِظَاتِ. He says, and when Allah, with the order and command of protecting the private parts and safeguarding the private parts, and also Allah's praise of those ones, those males and those females who safeguard and protect their private parts, Allah Ta'ala also prohibits them from coming close to fornication. He prohibits them from getting near to fornication. Now, the Shaykh, he says, أَنَّهُ يَنْبَغِي لَعَبْدٍ, and this is important for the servant, important for the slave. إِذَا رَأَى مِنْ نَفْسِهِ هَذِهِ حَالَةً, that when he sees himself in this situation, وَأَنَّهُ يَحُشُّ لِفِعْلِ الْحَرَامِ, and that he is being aroused to commit some evil act. He's being aroused to commit a prohibited act. وَيَرَى, either from something that he sees, أو يسمع, or from something that he hears, from the likes of speech that will arouse him to want to do the haram, then he has to quickly subdue. He has to quickly subdue the likes of these desires within him. He has to be able to acknowledge that, to diagnose that there is a problem, right? That there is a problem, because the things that are calling me to make the haram is looking appealing to me. Then a person has to realize, okay, this is a symptom of a sickness. So thus he diagnosed himself that he is sick. There's some sickness in his heart. And with that, the Shaykh, he says, فَيَجْتَهِدْ, فِإِضْعَافٍ, so therefore he will fight so that he doesn't increase upon this sickness. And he will prevent himself from this evil and these most lowly, dangerous things and the like. So therefore he would fight himself and struggle and wage war against himself, so that he has a sound heart and upon this soundness and safety away from the likes of this evil sickness. Now, and from doing that is that we leave off those things which will lead to it, because within that there is a protection for the private parts that we have been ordered to do. So as you see, as you go through these ayat, Allah Ta'ala, He is warning the women and prohibiting them from that which will take away from their integrity and will jeopardize their piety, and with that will jeopardize what? Their shyness and the like. You see? That which will jeopardize their piety, Allah Ta'ala is warning the women and prohibiting that from them. So from that, Allah Ta'ala, He says, وَقَرْنَ فِي بُيُوتِكُنْ, and therefore stay in your houses. Stay in your houses. The ulama, they explain, as Imam Sa'di, he says, إِقْرَرْنَا فِيهَا, meaning stay there, spend a lot of time there. لِأَنَّهُ أَسْلَمْ وَأَحْفَظْ لَكُمْ, because your homes, it is safer for you, and it is a more serene environment for you. So to stay in your homes, because it is safer in a more serene environment for you. Now, and then Allah Ta'ala, He says, وَلَا تَبَرَّجْنَا تَبَرَّجُ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ الْأُولَى, and do not display yourselves, do not display your adornments with the likes of the tabarruj, or the displaying of adornments from the times of ignorance. Naam. فَلَا تَبَرَّجْنَا تَبَرُّجَ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ الْأُولَى, and do not make the tabarruj like the tabarruj of the days of Jahiliyyah. Now, we must go over now, what is tabarruj? What does it mean to display one's adornments? وقال ابن أبي نجيح هو تبختر. التبختر. The tabarruj, it means التبختر, which means swag or swagger, meaning the way in which the women in Jahiliyyah, for lack of a better term, they strut their stuff. Okay? He says, وَقِيلَ هُوَ إِظْحَارُ الزِّينَةِ وَإِبْرَازِ الْمَحَاسِنِ لِلرِّجَالِ. He says, and this means that she's strutting her stuff and she's showing off her adornments and exposing her beauty to men. She's showing her beauty and displaying it and exposing it to men. This has been prohibited. Ma'am. وَقَالَ مُجَاهِدٍ, and Mujahid, he said, كانت المرأة, that verily the woman, was meant by it is that the woman تخرج وتمشي بين يدي الرجال, meaning that she goes out and she walks amongst the men. فذلك تبرج الجاهلية. He said, and this is the tabarruj of Jahiliyyah, that she goes out and she goes out and she walks and she goes around the men. وقالت قتادة, and Qatada rahimahullah ta'ala, the great Imam, he said, وَلَا تَبَرَّجْنَا تَبَرُّجْ جَاهِلِيَّةِ الْأُولَى was meant by this verse, يَقُولُ إِذَا خَرَجْتُنَّ, meaning that when you go out of your houses, right? When you go out of your houses, وَكَانَتْ لَهَا مَشِيئَةً, now, and that she has they go out of their homes and they're walking in a shameless and flirtatious manner. Now, she's walking out with a mashia, and that is in a most flirtatious and a shameless manner. So thus, Allah Ta'ala, He has prohibited this. And this is what is meant by a tabarruj. وقال مقاتل, and al-Muqatil bin Hayyan, he said what is meant by tabarruj, it means that verily أنها تلقي الخمار على رأسها. He says that it means that she puts the khimar on her head. Now I want you to pay attention to these meanings of tabarruj. That the woman puts the khimar on her head. وَلَا تَشُدُّهُ, but she does not wear it properly. She puts it on her head, but she does not wear it properly, so that her necklace or her earrings and her neck, all of that can be seen. It's exposed. So her khimar is there, her head is covered, but she's not covered properly, so that from her adornments, things from her adornments can be seen, like her necklace, her earring, her neck, her nose ring, and the like. Okay? That this is what is intended by a tabarruj. And he said this tabarruj, this is a tabarruj. And Allah Ta'ala has addressed all of the believing women with regards to a tabarruj. And that is a tabarruj, it is haram. It is not permissible. So we understand from this that tabarruj, it is not just restricted to a woman going outside of her house and she's not covered. That yes, her going out not being covered, that enters into it. But also, her going out improperly covered also enters into it. So that she has nothing on from hijab, then yes, no doubt this is tabarruj. But also, if her hijab is not on properly, this also is from a tabarruj, which is prohibited. And also, if she has her hijab on properly, her hijab is proper, but she's walking amongst men in a most flirtatious manner. She can have on niqab, everything, but she's walking amongst men and flirting with them in a most flirtatious manner, then this also constitutes a tabarruj. This also constitutes a tabarruj, that she's showing off her adornments improperly. This also is tabarruj, as we have in the statement of Mujahid, meaning that she goes out and she walks amongst the men. That she goes out and she walks amongst the men. Now this is regardless whether she's covered or she's not. These are things in which we are to stay away from, because these are things that would jeopardize and compromise shyness, and they would jeopardize and compromise piety. Now, and then after warning the women from falling into haram, and by way of that commanding them with the opposite of that to establish the righteousness in general, Allah Ta'ala, He commands the women with some specific aspects of righteousness that they are to concentrate and pay close attention to. So Allah Ta'ala, He says, وَأَقَمْنَا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتِينَا الزَّكَاةَ وَأَطِعْنَا اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ. He says, and perform the salah, and to pay the zakat, and to obey Allah and His Messenger. And to obey Allah and His Messenger. Imam Ibn Kathir, he says in his tafsir, that نَهَاهُنَّ أَوَّلًا عَنِ الشَّرِّ. He said, firstly, Allah prohibits them from committing evil. ثُمَّ أَمَرَهُنْ بِالْخَيْرِ. And then Allah enjoins upon them to establish the good. From إقامة الصلاة, from establishing the prayer. وَهِيَ عِبَادَةٌ اللَّهِ وَحْدَهُ لَا شَرِيكَ لَهُ. And this is by worshipping Allah alone, without any associating any partners with Him. This is worshipping Allah alone without associating any partners with Him. And therein you will find the khair. Therein you will find all khair. And the Shaykh goes on and he says, وَإِيتَاءِ الزَّكَاةِ, and to paying the charity. وَهِيَ الْإِحْسَانِ إِلَى الْمَخْلُوقِينَ. And the paying of the charity, then this is acting in a most noble and good manner with other people. That when you pay the charity, this is acting in a most noble and good manner with other people. So they were first prohibited from committing the haram, and then ordered and commanded to do the good. And then Allah Ta'ala, He says, وَأَطِعْنَا اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ, and obey Allah and obey the Messenger. And the Imam, the great Imam Ibn Kathir, rahimahullah Ta'ala, he says, وَهَذَا مِنْ بَابِ الْعَطْفِ الْعَامِ عَلَى الْخَاصِ. And this is from the instance of something specific being followed by something that is general. So if we look to this ayah that can be found in Surah Al-Ahzab, and it's verse number 32 and 33, we will find therein directives by way of which we, and in particular the women, the sisters, they may attain piety and righteousness, establish shyness and the like, and safeguard themselves from that which would harm them. And thus, by implementing these things and adorning themselves with the likes of these characteristics, they would be displaying good conduct and good character. And that which is opposite of these characteristics that were mentioned, then verily these are traits from bad character and bad conduct. So we encourage the sisters to reflect over what was said, to look at themselves, to evaluate and to reevaluate themselves in light of these ayat that were mentioned, in light of these ahadith that were mentioned from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and to adorn themselves with this righteous character, and to help one another in the establishment of this righteousness, and to help one another upon the birr and the taqwa, as Allah Ta'ala had commanded us to do, to cooperate upon birr and taqwa, upon righteousness and piety and fearing Him, Allah Ta'ala, and to aid and to help one another upon these ways, and to be sources of good and benefit and reminders for your sisters. And we know this is a festive occasion, and we know the sisters are having fun, and we don't want to discourage them from having fun, but we want to remind them that when they're having fun and when they're laughing and the like, that they laugh in a most Islamic way, as there comes a hadith in Bukhari and Muslim عن عائشة رضي الله تعالى عنها, on our mother Aisha رضي الله تعالى عنها, where she said قالت ما رأيت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, she said, I never saw the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mustajmi'an. She says, I've never seen the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mustajmi'an qat. I've never seen him laughing in an extreme manner ever. A ضاحكا حتى ترى منه لحواته. She says, meaning that I've never saw him laugh in such an extreme manner that you will see all of the insides of his throat and his tonsils and the like when he was laughing. That he never laughed in such a way that you will see all of the innermost of his mouth and his ugula and the like when he was laughing. وَإِنَّمَا كَانَ يَتَبَسَّمْ, but rather he would just smile. Rather, he would just smile. So this is a reminder for the sisters to, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, try to implement this hadith from that's been collected by Bukhari and Muslim on authority of our mother Aisha, that when you're having fun and you're laughing and the like, that you laugh in the most Islamic manner. And this is that which we have to train ourselves to do, as in the West we have been taught and reared upon the opposite, to fall out laughing, mouth all open, everyone sees what you ate and everything like that. And we have to change, and we have to train ourselves to change these un-Islamic things and replace them with the Islamic mannerisms, and that is by laughing in the way in which we were taught to laugh by the Prophet ﷺ. And in closing, our Shaykh Imam Al-Uthaymeen rahimahullah ta'ala, that verily when he would laugh he would just smile in implementing this hadith. So we encourage everyone to try to implement this hadith and the other hadith that we heard and the ayat that we have heard. ونكتفي بهذا. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم وجزاكم الله خيرا.